Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us today and welcome. Welcome to our webinar, a very important webinar to launch the results of our 2025 Open Budget Survey for Sub-Saharan Africa. My name is Djibril Badiane, and I am the director of the program for the French-speaking office of IBP. I am very pleased to be with you today, and it's a great pleasure for me to be the moderator of today's webinar. As you know, we will have many different participants coming from various international and sub-regional institutions, also governments and supreme audit institutions, and also members of civil society who are with us today. And many of these civil society partners have been working with IBP for many years about budget issues and public financing. It's an honor for me to moderate the discussion today. For about an hour and 25 minutes, we will have a discussion and an exchange, and we hope everybody will be able to contribute to our discussion so that we can further our efforts to improve best practices in budget transparency, and also to understand how governments better understand how governments collect data and how they use budgets on behalf of citizens. In terms of technical aspects, this webinar is interpreted in 2 languages. We have both French and English. So once you have connected to Zoom, please click on the button that says interpretation, or it may be under the button that says more, and you have an option to choose either French or English. And for the slides that you will be seeing, you also have an option to view the slides either in English or in French. And you can do this by clicking on the 2 tabs at the top of your Zoom screen. That said, let me quickly go over today's agenda. As I said, this is about an hour and a half webinar. First of all, we will have some welcome remarks that I will present as the moderator, and I will explain a few quick notes too about some logistics. And then we will have a presentation from some of our technical and financial partners, such as UNICEF and some of our technical partners in the African community. And then we will also have a discussion to talk about the OBS presented by some of our colleagues, Torbert and Sally Torbert, for example. And then we will open the floor for a discussion to talk about some of the different results that we will be presenting. And this will give us a chance to talk about some of the countries' results. And particularly, we will hear from some countries like Cameroon, Malawi, Rwanda, but also Senegal. And they will be sharing some of their best practices, but also their knowledge in terms of how the OBS has been evolving in their countries. And then we will also have a question and answer session about the different presentations that you will have heard. And then we will come back for an overall overarching discussion about next steps and recommendations based on the results of the 2025 OBS. Today we will be talking about the French-speaking part of Africa, 33 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we'll be sharing the results that focus on Sub-Saharan Africa. And we will be talking about different practices that we've seen and best practices that are being implemented. So don't hesitate. If you have any issues with your sound or being able to hear your audio or seeing the slides, let us know if you're having any issues in the chat. If you have any technical problems, then we have a team in the background who will help you with any technical difficulties you may be having. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, or the Q&A rather, the question and answer box. I would like to now present Dr. Sudhanshu for 2 minutes to open. He's a chief economist and director of the Center of Excellency at UNICEF, and he will give us a few opening remarks. Dr. Handa, are you with us today?
Yeah, I'm here. Merci beaucoup. Vous avez la parole pour votre leçon inaugurale, Dr. Handa.
Thank you. You have the floor for your opening remarks. And once again, thank you, Dr. Handa, for being with us today for this important webinar to present the results of the 2025 OBS for Sub-Saharan Africa. So you are, again, the lead economist, if I am not mistaken, and director of the Center of Excellency for Poverty at UNICEF. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Parfait. Très bien. Donc,
perfect. Okay, well, you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Merci.
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us this space today. I would just want to say good morning to those on the other side of the world. Good afternoon to those here in Africa. I'm speaking from Nairobi today, actually. And I want to say, first of all, on behalf of UNICEF, thank you so much to the IBP, in particular, Anna, Sally, David, Alex, and in fact, the whole team for this partnership. UNICEF has been partnering with the IBP for more than 10 years, and we really look forward to continuing this collaboration. Now, I've actually only been in this position for this is my third week, so I'm quite new in this particular role to UNICEF. But I actually was first in UNICEF about 20 years ago. And at that time, UNICEF started to get engaged in the financial aspects of development. And I know that that's something that people do not know too much about for UNICEF. And that portfolio has been growing over the years. And it's really, really exciting. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why I decided to come back and work for UNICEF. So the public finance side is the unglamorous side of UNICEF and of the development work that we do. But ultimately, if you think about it, and we think about it that way, it's actually one of the most important parts of the job. So, why does this matter for UNICEF, right? For us, the links between the budget and children are not abstract. They are very, very tangible. The budget transparency sits upstream of every service a child depends on. We cannot, discuss with governments or hold them accountable for what it spends on children and on the social sectors if we cannot first understand and interpret the budget. So this is why our partnership and our kind of commitment to the Open Budget Survey is so strong. We view it as a public good. It is independent, it is comparable across countries, and it is repeated over time. And it is that consistency that makes it more than just a snapshot. So for us here at UNICEF, the stakes are quite concrete. As an example, 27 of our country offices worked and contributed directly to this round of the OBS. Now, we'll get into the details of the results in a bit, but just a couple of perspectives from the region. First of all, while the progress is uneven, as we'll see in the results that will be shown, what is maybe more exciting and positive is that progress is possible, even in the most challenging and fragile settings. We see governments with real determinations to open up and to show how public money is decided and spent, often under serious fiscal and political pressures. That determination is real and it deserves to be recognized. The second thing that we see is there's more ambition around transparency, but not just for its own sake. The governments are working to involve not just the public, but in fact, even children in some places. And so this is something that we also wanted to highlight. Now, the fact that governments are taking the participation of children more seriously is, of course, especially important on our continent, because we have nearly 690 million children across the continent. And in fact, almost 1 in every 2 people is a child. So budget decisions really have implications for children. Let me talk a little bit about the debt situation, because that is front and center when we talk about the budget in Africa. The scale is quite stark. Nearly 50% of Africans live in countries that spend more on debt service than on education and health combined. Across Sub-Saharan Africa, governments now spend about 19% of their revenue on debt service. This is almost 3 times what it was just 10 years ago, and it's the largest, steepest increase in any world region. And of course, behind those figures are children, right? Debt is essentially a silent inheritance. It's an invisible mortgage we have signed in our children's names, forcing them to buy back a future that we have already spent. Secondly, rising debt, as we know, crowds out crucial public services for children: health, education, social protection. And so when debt is poorly managed, children pay a price in terms of their future development. Let me move on and talk about the partnership and the road ahead. A couple of things on just the whole process of the Open Budget Survey. Over the years, the Open Budget Survey instrument has changed, and UNICEF really values the open approach that the OBS takes. It's responsive to partners' interests and to the evolving context, and that's a very welcome openness. In terms of just the results today, remember, it's not what the scores are that matters, but it's really what we do with the results, how we take those forward and how we use them to initiate dialogues in our countries. And so in closing, let me just encourage participants that take these results, use them. This is just the starting point, and use them to open up conversations about the budget, about debt, and about how governments are using the public funds. Thank you so much for giving me the space, and I look forward to hearing the results.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Dr. Handa,
Pour votre leçon inaugurale.
for your opening remarks.
Note avec beaucoup
And
d'intérêt.
I was very, I found them to be very interesting. And thank you once again
Accompagner donc
for all your support that you provided to IBP in this OBS process,
sur le budget ouvert en Afrique subsaharienne.
and especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. UNICEF as a key partner, as I was saying, in this region of Africa,
L'évaluation de 2025.
for especially, and was a key partner, especially for the 2025 OBS.
Les gouvernements
I like the fact that you said that more and more governments are taking into account the participation of children, and that they are looking at how they can continue to work with the budgets to reduce poverty for children especially, and also how this is taking into account public policies. Thank you for these introductory words, and we will of course have the opportunity to come back a little bit later to discuss some of the data you presented. Without further ado, I will now like to give the floor to my colleague, Sally Torbert, who works with IBP and who is the global lead for policy and research at IBP.
Research lead. Sally,
Sally, I did have a question for you
dans ce webinaire-là.
as we kick off this webinar. Where do you think Sub-Saharan Africa is currently in terms of how it's taking advantage of these opportunities, and how it's maybe applying the results of the 2025 EBO, and also for future versions of the EBO? Where do you think Sub-Saharan Africa is today, and where does it need to make more efforts to be able to really take advantage of these opportunities to continue moving forward and making progress? I will now hand you over the floor for about 12 minutes, Sally, and I know that you will be able to stick within this time. So you have the floor, Sally. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Djibril. And thank you all for joining us today as we are going to be sharing with you the results for the Open Budget Survey 2025 and what it tells us about budget accountability across Sub-Saharan Africa. And so to start, I'm going to actually turn the question that Djibril asked over to all of you. So we have a quick survey for you. And unlike the Open Budget Survey, which has 218 questions, this survey has just one question for you. And that is, looking at the Sub-Saharan Africa region, where do you see the greatest opportunity for progress on budget accountability over the next 5 years? And so on your screen in Zoom, you will soon see a little Zoom quiz open up and pop on your screen. And the options that you can pick are publishing missing budget documents and information, including on debt, fiscal risk, and public investment, institutionalizing public consultations in the national budget cycle, strengthening the legislature's role in budget approval and execution, or improving follow-through on audit findings. So take a moment. We'd like you to look at these options and pick the option that resonates most with you. We're going to give you 1 minute. So we hope that you're reviewing these options. The translation of these questions is also in French in the chat, as you can see. So please take a moment to select the best question that the best response to this question. Where do you think Sub-Saharan Africa has the greatest opportunity for progress in the next 5 years? Okay, we hope you've made a selection. Let's see the findings. And so now we can show you the results. What did you answer? Interesting. Okay, wonderful to see. About 4 in 10 of you, 39%, said that the greatest opportunity is around publishing missing budget documents and information, including on debt, fiscal risk, and public investment. We also see some answers for these others. And of course, as you'll see in my presentation to come, there are opportunities to improve on all of these, but very great to see where your own priorities are in terms of where you think the biggest opportunity for progress is in the next 5 years. So thank you all for taking the time to reflect on that question. But that's going to be the topic that we're going to discuss during today's webinar. And before I jump into the results of the Open Budget Survey 2025, I want to start with a number that I think frames the entire conversation that follows. In that, according to the latest Afrobarometer survey, more than 3/4 of people on the continent say that it's difficult to find out how their governments use their tax money. And at the same time, the average cost of borrowing for African countries has risen by more than 90% in just 4 years. Aid funding across the region is contracting, while debt service is consuming a larger share of revenue than in any other region. And so in this context, we would argue that budget accountability matters very much. And especially when fiscal space is tight, when governments need to mobilize more domestic revenue, and when there's going to be difficult choices around spending, the question of whether the public can see, scrutinize, and influence these budget choices is no longer a technical question. It is the question of whether budget systems are trusted enough to carry the weight that's being placed on them. And this is where the OBS data points. And so I want to spend the next few minutes showing you what that means for the work ahead. So what is it that the Open Budget Survey is? The Open Budget Survey 2025 covers 33 countries across the Sub-Saharan Africa region. And the OBS measures 3 things. It measures transparency, whether governments are giving timely, comprehensive, and information about how budgets are planned and spent. On participation, whether civil society and the broader public, including historically excluded groups, have real opportunities to engage in the moments that matter. and oversight, whether legislatures and audit institutions have the authority and the practices that are needed to scrutinize how budgets are being planned and how money is spent. The OBS is conducted in each country by an independent civil society partner, many of whom are with us today, as well as researchers in each country, and it's based on concrete evidence of actual government laws and practices. And in each round, we do invite the government to review and comment on the draft rounds and provide their feedback. Here's the overall findings for the Open Budget Survey in this round. At the regional level, we see that transparency and oversight are moderate. Participation is also the weakest pillar, both in this region, but also globally. But we'd actually like to flag the direction of travel much more than the averages, in that in this round, we see that even though participation is starting relatively low, it actually has increased and moved upwards for the second round of the Open Budget Survey. Legislative oversight has also improved slightly, but transparency has not. It is held steady, which in a region under a lot of pressure is itself a finding worth pausing on. But these regional averages mask important stories underneath, in that several countries undertook substantial reforms this round, while others protected gains that they'd made earlier, even under difficult conditions. So we'd like to flag 3 countries in particular that have made progress this round. Cameroon has steadily climbed to a transparency score of 58, putting it close to this level, the threshold of sufficient transparency. And the Supreme Court's audit bench has now made its annual audit report public for the first time. In Zimbabwe, the transparency score has risen by 39 points since 2017, and that has been the product of sustained collaboration between civil society, the Ministry of Finance, UNICEF, and other partners. Mauritania, which was assessed in the survey for the first time this round, is publishing a citizens' budget in Arabic, French, and 3 national languages. Importantly, the survey results this round show us something very important that connects transparency to the question of who the budget actually serves, and that governments are starting to link budget information to questions of inclusion. And this connects to the remarks that Dr. Handa made in opening the webinar, that the budget underpins the information about how resources are made available to all citizens, especially to children and other groups who rely the most on government services. In this round, we've seen that 8 countries now disclose in their draft budgets estimates of all of the policies that they've enacted that directly benefit the country's most underserved populations. Around 4 in 10 countries have some form of gender responsive or green budgeting practices in place. One example of this is in Benin, where the draft budget now comes with a gender sensitivity analysis and includes a compiled view of social spending and a separate analytical note on the budget from the perspective of people who are living with disabilities. In Rwanda, the government has integrated climate and gender budgeting into their budget circular call itself, so that each budget, every single budget agency has to plan and track their budget against both of these lenses every single year. On participation, we see that underlying this regional average score, there's actually a lot of diversity in practice across the region. A few countries that have done very well this round include Benin, who jumped 21 points on the participation score to reach a participation score of 52, which is one of the highest in the world. And Benin did not get there through just one channel of public engagement. This score reflects participation built into the budget calendar across line ministries and parliamentary commissions who are opening engagement at different stages of the budget cycle. And the Ministry of Economy and Finance also now publishes records of how public input was received and how they used it in making decisions. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the government also shares a draft budget framework with civil society before the finance law is drafted and includes groups representing underserved communities in these consultations. Parliament's finance commissions also meet with civil society during the review of the draft budget law to discuss sectoral spending analyses. And yet we do see that some of these practices are not yet typical across the entire region, but they do show us how institutionalized public engagement is possible. On oversight, this is the most uneven across all of the three pillars. In this round, we see legislative oversight has improved modestly, but at the same time, audit oversight has actually slipped. And the deeper issue that we'd like to flag is what happens after the government conducts an audit. So here you see data in terms of how are governments tracking the follow-up actions that governments take to audit findings after an audit is released. And we see that actually only 3 countries, Côte d'Ivoire, South Africa, and Tanzania, have either audit institutions or legislatures that track and report on the implementation of all audit recommendations, even though several more countries also do some tracking for some of the recommendations, but not all. On the executive side, the picture is much thinner. Only a handful of finance ministries report themselves on what they have done in response to an audit finding, and none do so about all audit findings. And this is the missing link where we say, in the accountability loop, how do we know that governments are actually taking action on the findings of audits? And this is where some of the most achievable accountability reforms are possible. You also heard in Dr. Handa's opening remarks the challenge of how are we reporting and talking about debt? And this is part of the picture that the 3 pillars alone don't capture. You have to look deeper. And I want to close in on it because I think this is also an area where future progress really is possible. Right now, Sub-Saharan African countries are being asked to mobilize more domestic revenue and manage more debt, often with less aid and in a more constrained fiscal environment. And yet, as you can see here, only about 1/3 of countries publish all the key headline figures on borrowing and debt as part of their draft budgets, and none publishes complete information on the composition of debt. So what type of specific loan instruments are being used to take out debt? Or on long-term fiscal sustainability in terms of, is the level of debt that we are carrying as a government sustainable over, say, a 10-year timeframe? In this round, you also heard Dr. Handa mention that we conducted a new debt accountability pilot assessment that covers 10 countries in the region. And that assessment found that even when debt data is published, borrowing decisions are largely disconnected from the budget process. Legislatures also rarely exercise the oversight authority, even when they have that authority, and that public participation on issues of public debt is almost non-existent. And so this is an accountability gap that we would argue, if left unaddressed, makes fiscal pressure sound more like fiscal mismanagement. And closing that gap is really the next frontier in budget accountability. My last point that I want to make in what we found with the Open Budget Survey this round is the role of civil society, and that many of the gains that I have mentioned in this presentation are the result of civil society engaging with government as a central part of the story around improvements. And I'll give you 3 examples of how that happens, and many of our speakers to come will share more. But in Rwanda, a proposal made by Transparency International Rwanda at a public OBS launch led to the establishment of a multi-stakeholder platform that now brings together the ministries of finance, local government, the Auditor General's office, and civil society. And they've added new language on public participation as part of the 2024 budget call circular as a direct result of these discussions. In the Gambia, a civil society coalition led by Gambia Participates has worked with the Audit Office and the Finance Ministry to produce citizens' versions of the enacted budget and the audit report. And they successfully challenged an unlawful budget allocation with the Supreme Court, which ended up returning public funds to the public purse. And the Gambia's public participation score has also risen 29 points since 2019. In Malawi, the NGO Coalition on Child's Rights has used 5 years of budget analysis to make the case for early childhood development, and that has doubled allocations in almost 2 years. These are not isolated stories. This is what part of making the data on public participation and inclusivity is actually measuring, on whether or not the environment that civil society is operating in puts us and is allowing civil society to play this role. But at the same time, we do know that these systems are under pressure, especially with the declining aid. And so we need to talk together about how do we continue this progress even in the current moment. So all of this is to say, we very much have more resources and more information available to you. You can see a QR code on your screen that you can scan. Today, we have launched a new regional report that contains much more information and stories about what we're seeing in the region. But to close, the Open Budget Survey 2025 tells us that even under serious fiscal and political pressure, accountability in Sub-Saharan Africa is moving in the right direction, and the work ahead is clear, and that we need to expand transparency improvements in the parts of the budget where information is still too thin, particularly on debt. We need to build on the participation practices that are working and institutionalize them. We need to find ways to close the audit loop, especially on the executive side of reporting on their actions taken on audit findings. And we need to protect the civil society and government reform partnerships that are the engine of almost every gain that we've documented here. And this is how we would argue that budget systems become a foundation for trust, and how domestic resource mobilization becomes politically possible and not just technically necessary. So before I close, one last thing I'd like to say is a deep expression of gratitude to our civil society partners in the 33 countries where we conducted the survey, as well as the reformers in finance ministries, parliaments, and audit offices across the region, whose work today is the reason that we have good stories to tell. A huge thank you to UNICEF, who is our co-sponsor of this event, and their strong partnership in advancing budget transparency and accountability in the region, as well as to the UK FCDO and the European Commission, whose support has made this work possible. So please do read this full regional report and the individual country results that also underpin the findings. Thank you so much, and back to you, Djibril.
Parfait, parfait. Non, non, merci.
Excellent.
Merci beaucoup, Sally, pour,
Thank you so much, Sally,
la présentation, donc,
for this presentation
régionale, donc,
of the regional report and the Sub-Saharan Africa region. A very interesting report with
le degré, effectivement,
data that talks to us about the level of transparency and this whole topic. I'm very happy that you stayed right on time, 12 minutes, and that you answered my initial question about what is the progress that our country should make and what are the opportunities we can take advantage of to increase the scores. So the responses are about this provision of additional information on the gestion of the management of debt. As you noted, this is really an emerging topic for public finance in Sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, there were a lot of constraints in the management of the debt, and we have social pressures, etc. And so we need to have greater effort in publishing information regarding that. Another information you talked about is this key role of civil society. So the examples of Malawi, Cameroon really show that the work that is done by civil society contributes to improving these scores. So I want to invite the participants to consult the website that Sally shared on the last page of her presentation to consult the regional report and also the country reports that are listed there to see that the world averages have been provided, 16 out of 100 for citizen participation in budgets. And so you can consult the various scores that are provided there. 82% of the countries that were evaluated now have a citizen budget. I want to remind us, this was a big recommendation that we had from the previous OBS, that to have this citizen budget, and provide this opportunity for participation. And 4 out of 10 countries evaluated are really publishing data regarding climate, etc. Thank you for this excellent presentation. And I invite the participants to consult the website and see the country results individually. Now, we have another speaker from the African Union, Dr. Patrick Ndzana Olomo. I hopefully pronounced it correctly. You are the head of the Economic Policy and Sustainable Development at the African Commission. If you are here, Dr. Patrick, I think I see you on my screen. So I'll give you 5 minutes to share your thoughts about what you just heard. So you have the floor. It's 12:30 here in Senegal. Thank you very much, Djibril. And I want to take this occasion to thank Sally for this brilliant presentation she just made. She gave us a very interesting point of view regarding what the report provides as items of understanding. I will do my presentation in English. I was educated in English, so I will do that.
On behalf of the African Union Commission, I would like to express our profound appreciation to the International Budget Partnership and UNICEF for convening this vital regional consultation today. I think the report that we are launching today presents a clear picture of what the continent is doing and what needs to be done more in terms of budget transparency. The findings presented are certainly indicating that Africa stands at a critical accountability crossroads. And this is due to the fact that the continent is navigating an unprecedented era of fiscal strain, exacerbated by a skewed international financial architecture, soaring sovereign debt burdens, and deep vulnerability to global shocks. For the African Union, this publication is coming at an opportune time, and it is not merely a technical balancing act, because it is providing the financial blueprint for our continent's development and the ultimate metric that our citizens should look at to enhance their trust. We recognize that a transparent budget is an indispensable weapon against economic instability. And in this, to fully address the transparency gaps that the OBS report 2025 is highlighting, we must directly connect the dots between budget public accountability, sovereign debt management, and the fight against illicit financial flows. First, in our perspective and considering our current debt crisis, when debt services or debt servicing costs are swallowing a huge amount, a huge percentage of domestic revenues, national budgets are hollowed out, leaving minimal fiscal space for vital social spendings on infrastructure, on healthcare, education, and child-focused social protection. The African Union has taken bold steps already in addressing these challenges, and it is in that perspective that we have organized in 2025 the first ever African Union Conference on Debt that has culminated with the adoption of the Common African Position on Debt. The Common African Position on Debt is a tool, a continental tool, that speaks about structural reforms and how sovereign debt can be managed effectively. However, it is important to note that international advocacy must be mirrored by internal clarity. We must eliminate hidden liabilities. True fiscal resilience required absolute transparency in how public debt is contracted, utilized, and repaid. This ensures that every borrowed dollar is openly accounted for and channeled into productive investments. At the African Union, we are also working to speak about budget transparency without looking at the bleeding that we are seeing on the continent. It is absolutely important, and the report highlights it, that countries have made substantial progress in increasing their capacities in domestic resource mobilization. But those resources, when collected, are leaking out of the continent and leaving the continent with a huge toll that is insufficiently addressed. Allow me to give some figures to make sure that we understand what we're talking about. Africa is losing yearly an approximate amount of $587 billion due to leakages. These leakages can be, presented as poor risk perception, that is taking away $74 billion. Illicit financial flows that are taking away $90 billion. Corruption is also causing a leakage of approximately $148 billion annually. In terms of international profit shifting, the continent is losing an approximate amount of $275 billion per year. So this means that when we are collecting our resources yearly, which we are also using to pay back the debt, because debt is taking away approximately 3/3 of what we are collecting, we are additionally losing $587 billion, which speaks to the figure of approximately a leakage of $1.6 billion daily. To address this challenge, the African Union Commission is working with partners such as UNICEF and other institutions such as UNECA and ATAF, the Africa Tax Administration Forum, and civil society organizations such as Tax Justice Network to address these challenges. And it is in that inclusive perspective that we have adopted the African Union strategy on illicit financial flows and tax. We are working with all African Union member states to enhance accountability and transparency and making sure that resources that are collected are effectively channeled to productive investments. This is not the task that the African Union can conduct alone. And I think one of the key results of the study is showing, the report is showing that there is need for us to increase civil society participation in budget processes. And that is what the African Union is doing at the moment, making sure that we create the inclusive space that speaks to the reality of our situation continentally. In this perspective, allow me to outline 3 major reforms coming from the report that we have in front of us. First of all, it is important to institutionalize, as was said in the report, inclusive public participation and to make sure that it becomes a reality. And in that perspective, we must move beyond simply publishing data. Member states must create legally mandated, accessible pathway for civil society and citizens, particularly the youth and marginalized groups, to effectively shape budget priorities and monitor expenditure. Secondly, it is important to mandate total debt revenue disclosure. And in the framework of the Common African Position on Debt, we are working with our member states to establish the African Debt Monitoring Mechanism that will be a public platform where debt data will be published by our member states. It is important to also note that we are enhancing our capacities in fighting against the leakages that I spoke about that are causing an approximate amount of 587 billion of loss. And we do believe that with the concrete participation of the civil society, we will be able to address that. Lastly, it is important to empower and resource oversight institutions. During our Specialized Technical Committee on Finance, Monetary Affairs, Economic Planning and Integration, we have created the space working with oversight institutions to enhance their capabilities and capacities in aggressively strengthening the independence and capacity of supreme audit institutions. This is what we are doing, and we do believe that we will be able to address the challenges ahead of us. To conclude, dear Djibril, I would like once again to thank the two organizations that brought us together today, and maybe formulate the wish of seeing this report being presented to the Specialized Technical Committee on Finance during our meeting that will happen from 20th to 24th of July in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire this year. And lastly, this week on the 5th of June, we have an important session of the Fridays of the Commission where we will speak about the issue of debt, looking at the borrowers platform that was launched recently. And we do invite all the stakeholders and citizens that are connected here today to join us and to form the next barrier for leakages on the continent. Thank you, and over to you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patrick,
Votre présentation.
for this presentation.
Également pour,
And thank you
le partage d'informations par rapport
for sharing all this information regarding the various initiatives that have been undertaken by the African Union, and that to provide a better management of public finance in Africa. Two things I noted. $94 billion of illegal financial flows, losses for Africa. That's enormous. And so we also need we need greater investment in this sector of illegal financial flows. And we need to have innovation to provide help to states to counter these illicit flows. And the integration of young people and marginalized groups in this monitoring of public budgets. I think this is something that IBP is continuing to work on and to treat as a priority, because we strongly believe that marginalized groups must be involved. And of course, they must be involved in the planning and the execution of public policy. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to thank you for this brilliant presentation. And I hope that this presentation will be shared so that we can send it to all the participants at the end of this webinar. Now, we will now go straight to the panel. So we have 4 countries that were invited. We have first, the world panel will last 40 minutes. If we are efficient, we can do it in 30 minutes. We'll see. First, Cameroon is one of the countries that was invited. Then Malawi. Thirdly, Rwanda. And the last intervention will be Senegal. Cameroon goes first. So Mr. Charlie Martial Ngounou, who works with IBP since over 15 years now, and who is the president of Afro Leadership, an NGO, which is a key partner of IBP in terms of Francophone Africa and also Central and Africa. And he's going to talk to us. So the country has participated in the OBS since 2015. But since 2017, we've seen growth in budget transparency. When you're at 58 out of 100 right now. So the question I have for you, what is the secret ingredient, the sauce that's enabled Cameroon to create this very nice dish that is really an honor to Cameroon nowadays, and which nears the acceptable criteria? So I'll give you the floor for 8 minutes to talk about your work. So what are the ingredients that have allowed Cameroon to do this? So it's 12:54 on my watch. So you have the floor. Thank you. And thank you to all the speakers who already spoke. And thank you to our colleagues for being here. Cameroon, it is well before 2015 that we started to work with IBP. I think it's at least since 2008. And yes, we've had a very progressive trajectory. We had a bit of a seizure in 2017. There was a bit of a hiccup. There were changes in methods, and the inline publication was the one that was deemed acceptable. And we saw at that point that we had a rising trajectory in terms of ingredients. And I can't say all of them, but there's really this increase in the skills of civil society, which increasingly understands its needs to be involved in the budget conversation. But also in more general terms, it's more this collaboration within civil society itself, which means to take advantage of the various skills, be they technical skills, but also sectoral skills of the various civil society organizations that enable them to work as a network. I think this networking is extremely important. And so you have the Ministry of Finance that really, it's about this transparency of public finance. So it's important to integrate within the Ministry of Finance this civil society network within this overall plan of the reform of public finance, to have all these various actors that work at the sectoral level, but also more and more having this involvement with the Ministry of Finance, to have this link with civil society and other institutions, which amplifies the sectoral logic of which we spoke. And of course, there's the work done by the development agencies or the European Union, etc. And of course, the African Development Bank. All these projects help this work by civil society. There's also, we must talk about the effort done by the Supreme Audit Body, which enables to face the government with its responsibilities and to, which pushes the Minister of Finance to really emphasize transparency, the issue of publishing documentation. And, and we see it clearly on the various sites created by the Ministry of Finance. We see that there is an increase in the publication of documents. I won't stop there. So in our results, we can see that this issue of oversight has not grown. We've stayed at 33% since 2021, and we're still at the same score. So we have some issues in terms of the implementation of the reforms when we look at this internal integration of the policies. And if I'll talk about the challenges that we face. The Parliament still has very limited oversight during budget preparation, and this oversight is even weaker during the implementation. So this reduces Parliament's influence.
And even if these reforms are not sufficiently institutionalized, and so you don't see the effect from all the work that's being done. Now, the Ministry of Finance is preparing a publication calendar regarding for the benefit of civil society, etc. So there is an internal calendar but now they're preparing a calendar that's actually going to be public, and I think that's the right path for the dynamic we are currently creating.
Another weakness is perhaps that we haven't necessarily been able to implement all the specific recommendations that have come out of the audit report from the Supreme Audit Institute. So, of course, one of the difficulties is the credibility of the reforms, but at least the reforms in terms of oversight, we do have operational reforms, and the fact that the preparatory documents for the budget are not always published for citizens, generally speaking, or civil society in a timely manner. So, of course, that means that the different actors that are involved in preparing the budget can't necessarily get citizen input in time. And so there are some also constraints in terms of financial and material resources to be able to better manage this oversight process. So that's what I really appreciated the mention earlier of the African Union's initiative. And we really do need this type of support. And in Cameroon, we had the opportunity to be able to participate in the pilot phase for the debt module. And we had a number of challenges, and it was recommended that we should have an annual overall overarching plan that would be able to give us the possibility of get more data and information out to citizens. And so we need to have a comprehensive plan in debt management throughout the year. Of course, public participation is almost non-existent in some areas, as in the debt, in the area of debt. And I think that's where it's really critical to have public input in terms of public finance management. And especially as we talk about, this is the inheritance of the future generation. And so we have to look at debt service in our countries. And there are so many countries that are paying such a high debt service. And so throughout the year and the budget cycle, the annual budget cycle, we need to be able to involve civil society in this. And I think we have done a lot of work, especially in terms of the of debt, but I would like to highlight the urgent need for public actors, the Minister of Finance and others in the government to involve citizens and civil society more and more in the budget preparation process, but also at the execution stage. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Merci pour ces éclaircissements.
Thank you for those insights about the results in Cameroon. And you have made a lot of good progress. It's true in terms of previous years, even though, as you said, there is the issue related to oversight of the budget by the SAI, and especially with the National Assembly, that's maybe a weak point still that needs to be addressed, and that Cameroon needs to continue increasing budget transparency and oversight. I also appreciated the experience you shared about collaboration and how you're able to work with civil society and the Ministry of Finance to involve civil society more, because this collaborative initiative that IBP is doing in Cameroon for about 3 years now, I have seen that there has been really good collaboration between the Ministry of Finance and civil society on the ground, and also in terms of producing more information and publishing information more. And I think that this is helping strengthen budget transparency, which is one of the ingredients. Maybe you didn't talk about that explicitly, but that is also one of the ingredients for the secret sauce. And this is helping to continue improving budgetary transparency in Cameroon. Thank you, Charlie. And I'm sure that our participation with Afro leadership is not going to be limited to this webinar. We'll be continuing the discussion in Cameroon. Without further ado, I would also like to invite our participants to ask questions that you may have either in the chat or the Q&A. We have colleagues in the background who will be providing answers to your questions. We've got Sally and our other partners here who will be answering questions in the Q&A. So please feel free to post your questions there. We will now move on to Malawi. And for this, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Henry Machemba, who is the National Coordinator of an NGO Coalition on Child's Rights. Henry, Malawi had very low scores in terms of transparency, around 55 per 100, but below that, it was below 40 and now 46 for the latest round. But in developing your budget law and preparing the budget, has there been consultation with the citizens and in the major regions of Malawi? And it seems as though you have improved your consultation process, which has helped you to take into account civil society's voices in the budget preparation cycle. So I have a question. Have these practices become institutionalized now in Malawi? And if so, the initiatives that have been put into place to increase participation, have these brought about any other additional challenges? I'll give you a few minutes for that. Henry, are you there with us?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair, for this opportunity, and welcome all to Malawi. Yes, NGO Coalition on Child Rights is a national network of child-focused organizations, and we work collaboratively with so many actors, the likes of UNICEF, Save the Children, SOS, in working with the civil society organizations in the sector to capacitate their ability to influence and engage the government on budget issues at national and subnational levels. So for participation of citizens in the budget processes, especially at the pre-budget stage, this process is covered in the Malawi Public Finance Management Act 2022. So this is being institutionalized. And we have a section in that PFMA, Section 27, subsection 5, which mandates the Ministry of Finance to conduct pre-budget consultations with various stakeholders, including the citizens. So over the years, the Malawi government, through the Ministry of Finance, has been conducting these pre-budget consultations from between November to January every year. And the government of Malawi uses a 6-tiered kind of approach to conduct the consultations. First, the government consults with the development partners and other key institutions, international institutions, on issues of alignment, budget alignment, in preparation for the formulation of the budget. Second approach that government uses is the national and regional kind of consultation workshops by using the workshops that invite so many actors and citizens, citizen groups or interest groups to make submissions during the oral submissions during the workshops. The third approach is the budget hearings with MDAs, where the Ministry of Finance hosts various MDAs and allow them to justify or defend their proposals within the given budget ceilings before the formulation. Fourth approach is that the ministry uses constituency and sector based engagements, where the ministry selects key sectors for that particular year to engage, for example, the youth sector, the agriculture sector, and the like. And also that provides opportunities for these sectors to provide their opinion and the submissions. Fifth is the direct written submissions. So the ministry invites the public, provides an email address, and then invites the public to make submissions, written submissions to the ministry via that particular platform. And finally, the ministry uses the social media platforms, where under the on the website of the ministry, the public is expected and allowed to provide kind of feedback and proposals to the budget. So over the years, we have seen some significant impact in terms of how the provisions and submissions made by the citizens have seen their way into the national budget or have been considered. So, for example, Sari talked about the increased budget allocation to the child-sensitive social sectors, such as the early childhood development, that has seen a jump in terms of budget allocation for about 100% and over the years, but also the child protection allocation has seen a jump in terms of increased budget allocation. We have also seen removal of some value-added taxes for some imports due to the engagement with CSOs, for example, in the health sector, the Malawi Health Network, and also the Minibus Owners Association proposed a removal of VAT on minibus tires and the like, and that was considered by the government. We also saw the motorcycle taxi operators proposing to government to kind of waive the taxation compliance by giving them a window where they can remit the taxes and the like, and that was also considered and incorporated in the budget. We saw the youth sector that has engaged government on issues of youth-sensitive programming, like, for example, innovation, investment in innovation, and the like. We have seen that being considered by government in the budgets because of the submissions, and we have also seen some sector-specific funding reforms. For example, in the education sector, where we have seen an increase in terms of allocation to the education sector. For example, recruitment of new teachers, and also the textbook revolving and others, and scrapping off of secondary education fees. So all that is because of the submissions that the civil society organizations and the citizens submitted to the ministry. So in terms of the gaps, when we look at the Public Finance Management Act, Section 27, subsection 1, it mandates the ministry to produce and publish the short medium term framework for the budget. And this is called Economic and Fiscal Policy Statement, to publish it around November. And that should, the expectation is that that should form the basis for the consultations, so that when the minister is consulting the citizens or the public submissions and contributions should be aligned to the provisions in this statement. But what we have seen over the years is that the government produces the framework, the statement, but it does not make it public. It does not publish. So what happens is that when the ministry has called or invited the public to make submissions towards the budget, the public or the citizens or CSOs, they develop their submissions based on their individual advocacy interests, not necessarily in alignment with what the government has prioritized for that particular year. So with that, there is kind of a challenge where these platforms, the workshops, when the minister is hosting the consultations, the CSOs and the public, they look at this as an opportunity for advocacy, for influencing their own prioritized priorities within the sectors, education, health, children, and the like. While the government expects the citizens to contribute to their prioritized agenda for that particular financial year. So that's where the problem is. And also another issue, another gap is on the feedback mechanism, where when the ministry has collected input from the public, there is no designated mechanism, formal mechanism to provide feedback as to how much or what has been considered incorporated into the budget from the feedback and input that has been provided by the communities and the citizens. So these are some of the key challenges, but over the years, we have seen an increase in terms of interest, but also the quality of engagement by the citizens and the CSOs with the Ministry of Finance during the pre-budget consultations. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Henri.
Thank you very much, Henry, for these very relevant remarks. From Malawi, we understand that it is something that is already institutionalized, so that you have these forums for, that you have already set up a number of things, and this enables a coalition of organizations of civil society to participate in budgeting. Now, in terms of budgetary transparency, we understand there are quite a few documents that are not published, that are published but not published at the right time. So, we have this question of the timeframes and the completeness. And of course, the transparency score has drastically dropped in terms of Malawi. In terms of recommendations, you responded appropriately to the fact that you need to have closer ties with the budget department and the involvement of more actors to have a better understanding of the obstacles that exist and to bring up your score. Thank you very much, Henry, for your remarks. Now, Rwanda. Ms. Ndzana Mbabazi. She's an analyst in budgetary management at the Ministry of Finance of Rwanda. Ms. Ndzana, for Rwanda, we have very good scores, especially in terms of oversight of public finance. And overall, if we combine the oversight by the National Assembly and the Supreme Audit Body, we're at 61, so that puts us in the green zone. And if we look at the oversight by the audit body, then you get to an excellent score. And budget transparency, you're at 55 out of 100, and participation, 26 out of 100. So do you want to share with us your best practices that have enabled your country to really achieve these types of scores for the oversight of public finance? So you have 8 minutes, even if Henry took 1 minute away from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dieng from Rwanda. and I work under the National Budget Department as a budget analyst. Like you were saying that I should give a brief on the Malta Task Force for Rwanda, how it has been performing, and its success and the challenges that we have been having. Let me start by saying that we thank you very much for the opportunity given to us to share Rwanda's experience. And as well, everyone knows that Rwanda has made a very big, significant progress in the budget transparency and public participation over the last years. And to sustain this improvement, it has been addressed through the Open Budget Survey, where the government had to establish this multi-stakeholder Open Budget Survey. So this was brought together through having different government institutions, where we have the Ministry of Finance itself. It's made of the Ministry of Local Government. We have also different people from the civil society and also development partners. The objective of this multi-stakeholder task force, it was to be able to address different actions, different activities, and also to review different budget findings and identified gaps, and also agree on different priorities that were being raised during the OBS findings. The objective, however, also looked at the coordination part, and also improving on the transparency and also the public participation and the oversight through the budget cycle. These are the main core parts where the open budget task, the stakeholders that in that task force have to look at. Looking at the obvious findings, looking at the identified gaps, agreeing on the priorities, monitoring different progresses on what has been submitted through the obvious findings. So through all that, and also different dialogues where we have to meet and collaborate with different stakeholders, sharing common goals on the strengthening of the budget accountability. However, one of the key achievements has been on improving the coordination and ownership of the OBS recommendation across institutions. Secondly, it has also contributed to the availability of budget information. Thirdly, the engagement of citizens. And the last but not the least, it has also made strong awareness through the importance of transparency and accountability of the public finance. However, like many other reforms, we have faced challenges, including coordinating multiple stakeholders with different mandates, ensuring the participation and building technical capacity. It's also a challenge that we have, the capacity building part on the technical capacity of OBS. And we also had another challenge on the public participation practices. However, due to the strong leadership, regular engagement, commitments from other stakeholders have helped us to have these challenges solved. As a key lesson learned, this has improved the budget accountability. The budget accountability cannot be achieved through one institution alone. It requires continuous collaboration between the government, civil society, development partners, and establishing the OBS task force has also created a structured mechanism, which today has helped Rwanda to make a steady progress on the budget transparency and public participation. But going forward, as a country, we have been planning to have on the institutionalization of the task force, strengthening the citizen engagement mechanism. Like today, what we are doing about that, we have tried to engage the citizen through the planning and budget. When we are starting the budget, we always make announcement by the Ministry of Local Government in the different district meetings where they have to tell them that this year we are starting to prepare the budget. Please bring your suggestions, bring your requests towards the budget that is going to be prepared. And that has been an official communication that has been taking place in different citizens meeting, which happen maybe there's one for end of month where we do the cleaning, umuganda. There's also the community work, the community cleaning. There's also different meetings in a week where leaders meet citizens and discuss on different issues that they have. And now, through those community engagements, they have been able to be informed on the budget that is being prepared and also to give their views on what they want to see in the next budget. And also, Ministry of Finance has also worked on the citizen engagement where we produce what we call the citizen guide and submit in the 3 languages and submit it to the districts where the district leaders have to go down to the citizens during those meetings that happen and explain to them what is in the budget, what should they expect in that financial year that has been voted, and what has been achieved, of course. So through that, citizen engagement mechanism are being done, and we are planning to have more and more so that we can improve on our citizen engagement. There is also a continued implementation of the open budget survey recommendation, and also to improve on the accountability and management of government resource. With that, because I know that they had informed me that I have only 5 minutes, I think I've summarized how this open budget survey task force works, who is in that, the different government institutions, what we do about the coordination, about also addressing the gaps and monitoring the implementation of OBS findings that we have. Probably I can stop here in case one has a question. I'm ready to come back. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Ndzana, pour
Thank you so much
présentation.
for your presentation.
Bien voulu partager
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with
Ms.
us
Jenna.
the practices that have led to the improvement of your scores rather, for the 2025 OBS.
la mise en place
I know we were talking about setting up practices such as a working group, and I was smiling because today, in fact, in Benin, we are seeing that this is becoming also more improvements because they have been setting up this type of a scenario for the 2025 OBS. It was a working group of the different institutions that are working on this, and also the National Assembly and the budget institutions, but also civil society. And when I see that Rwanda has also been adopting this good practice, this reassures me, and that just shows that experience is being shared amongst the countries, and this is helping to improve transparency scores and also enabling citizens overall to have a better understanding of how these institutions work and publish information. So it was great to hear that practice, and I also understand that at the national level and the local level, you organize consultations for budget preparation that allow us to be able to involve the communities and also marginalized groups to provide feedback and input during the budget process. And the SAIs now understand the importance of oversight. And this had been one of the weaknesses in some of the different previous cycles of the OBS. Thank you very much for your presentation once again, and I sincerely appreciate your remarks. We only have a few minutes left, so without further ado, I'm going to move to Senegal. And in particular, I'd like to give the floor to the Director General of the Budget at the Ministry of Finance and Budget. And
C'est le lieu également pour moi de
And
les
this is
remercier.
also a time for me to thank everybody for their collaboration with IBP's office in Senegal and also the other countries in Sub-Saharan Africa who have been working with IBP. A big thank you to for your work in trying to improve transparency. So I will give the floor over to Senegal, which has been making a lot of efforts in terms of participation. I think there's been some improvement made compared to previous cycles. And I think your score has improved quite a bit from 40 in 2019 to 42 in 2023 and 2025 for your transparency score. And you've also been improving or making efforts to improve oversight processes. So I'd like to give you the floor to our Director General of Budget in Senegal for just a couple minutes. And this will be the last presentation from our panel of experts from the various countries. Is the DG from Senegal online?
Merci, Monsieur Badiane.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Badiane. Thank you for presenting these approaches that we've been taking. I'm the Director General of the Budget at the Ministry of Finance and Budget in Senegal. And I'd like to talk about some of the, I'd also like to say that we have some of our technical advisors online and others from the Ministry of Budget. In terms of sharing, I would say that since we have begun working on budget transparency and public debt management, Senegal has been strongly committed to improving transparency, accountability, and citizen participation, and working with our partners to improve our open budget process. This participation in the OBS, we've been participating in the OBS since 2017, the OBS that has been conducted by IBP. And if you analyze Senegal's score, when you look at Senegal's score, as we said earlier, we've made a lot of progress. And these scores, though, do highlight that there are persistent challenges in the various areas that are being assessed, notably transparency and citizen participation, but also budget oversight. And as we have been working on these issues, the Ministry of Finance and Budget, through the Director General, has been working to improve participation and democratic participation by our citizens in the budget process. The democratic changes that came about in our country have helped accelerate this process. The government has undertaken the mission of meeting these challenges, such as accountability, good governance, and transparency in public finance management. Amongst the actions that have been taken, we have adopted a law concerning access to information, and also this has been strongly supported by all of our political institutions. Also, in terms of our role in helping to manage the budget process, we are working to improve citizen engagement, and this will help us to promote more inclusive development. This is how we see the different and understand the different initiatives that have been undertaken since last year, since 2025, to improve Senegal's scores in terms of budget transparency. As you said earlier, we were somewhat lagging behind in terms of other countries. And so it is in this dynamic that the Office of Budget signed a partnership agreement with the NGO IBP to be able to profit and take advantage of their expertise in this area, so that they could help us strengthen our capacities in terms of citizen involvement in the budget process. Our strategic communication and also improvement in terms of advocacy and publishing transparent budget data, because the documents have to also be widely accessible, and then also improving our accountability before citizens. Our partnership with IBP has been a key tool in our efforts to improve budget efficiency and transparency. And this has helped us to establish this crucial link with citizens and civil society. And this is a strategic importance. And it's been part of our national agenda for development and economic transformation in Senegal. We believe sincerely that if citizens better understand budget documents, that this is going to be an essential tool to help citizens be able to better participate in the budget debate and in budget oversight. To put this vision into concrete actions, we have been deploying major actions that have been focusing primarily on developing a targeted action plan to improve our score on the OBS. So we organized a workshop to better explore the methodology used in the OBS, and this included representatives from the National Assembly and also the SAI. We are continuing to work on how we provide these documents and information and ensure that it is disseminated to civil society. Through our direct partnership with IBP, we have been able to increase our consultation. And we've also been working to promote more access to the budget so that all actors have a good understanding of the budget. In terms of our public finance reforms that have been undertaken in Senegal, the Director General of the Budget has led an exchange mission with Benin, where we were able to exchange experiences and practices with Benin. This was held from February to March, and the delegation included people from the Office of the Budget and also the Supreme Audit Institution. And this enabled us to really be able to gain valuable insights and information about the practices that have been used in Benin to improve budget execution and oversight and accountability. The Budget Office, along with IBP, has been working to implement actions to improve Senegal's scores in the upcoming cycles of the OBS. As you were saying earlier, there are a lot of good practices that we can adopt in terms of having a more open budget, and we can implement these pilot projects to improve budget participation and accountability in public finance management. And at the beginning of the year, we started planning the various budget tasks in this process, and we started also with the drafting of the next budget, taking into account how we would include civil society, and this is still in the process of being approved, and then this will help us to start a dialogue with citizens, which up until now has not really had, the citizens have not really had a formal framework to be able to implement this consultation. After the budget documents are published, we plan to hold workshops with civil society where we can discuss this budget proposal. And we will be focusing on developing a formal platform or a formal framework for discussion with civil society and consultation. These are some of the actions that we have been implementing and will be continuing to implement as quickly as possible to help Senegal to be able to improve its score and to continue to work towards improving citizen participation and open and transparent budget practices. Thank you very much for everything that you've shared with us, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation and for this information from the Office of the Budget. Thank you also for the contributions from the other countries we invited to speak during this roundtable. You shared with us the various actions that Senegal has been putting into place in order to improve its score in the upcoming cycles of the OBS. And I note that among other things, you have talked about formalizing collaboration, which was formalized with the regional IBP office in Senegal. And you talked about preparing for the next open budget survey. And you talked about working with Benin to be able to draw from their experience. And we're seeing this in various places in Africa. Senegal will be setting up an open budget. And we are seeing that this is something that can serve as a framework for other countries as well. In terms of producing budget documents, but also holding these consultations and having meetings with the ministry. These are all actions that will, of course, increase citizen participation in the various phases of the budget drafting, adoption, and execution processes. But also, this will help us to have more consultations with citizens during the budget development process. These are good recommendations that have been formulated for Senegal in the previous editions, 2023 and 2025. And I think that you are really making an effort to implement these recommendations to increase citizen participation. And thank you also for your very good cooperation and for thank you very much to all the different teams under the Ministry of Finance for your collaboration with IBP. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of our time of our round table with our 4 countries. We wanted to be able to have a question and answer session about these different interventions, but unfortunately, we've gone over our time by 12 minutes. We were supposed to finish 30 past, it's 43 minutes past. So I would simply like to say that some of the issues and some of the questions that were already posted in the Q&A or the chat, we will get answers from our various panelists for these questions, and then we will get the answers back out to you. But before we move on to our closing, I would like to ask all the participants to look at the links that we've put into the chat. And this would allow you to find links to the reports, the regional report for Sub-Saharan Africa with the OBS results for the 2025 OBS. And you'll be able to see the results for all the countries in this zone. And in addition to the regional report, you can also look at country by country reports to see the various reports and the results for each of the countries. IBP will continue to work on ensuring that there are publications for each country for the results, and so therefore we will be publishing this both at the overall level and then at a regional level. And then I'd sincerely like to also thank everyone, to thank all the participants today. I think at a certain point, we had over 225 participants on the webinar, or maybe more, from the 33 countries that were assessed in Sub-Saharan Africa, but even elsewhere we had participants from other regions of the world, the United States, Europe, and also from the Middle East and North Africa. I think that this was probably record participation, or a great interest was shown then in the publication of these results for Sub-Saharan Africa. So thank you very much for your participation. And for the panelists, I'd like to ask you to stay online for just a few minutes after our conclusion so that we can take a photo. And I'd like to thank all of our different presenters. We have our presenter from Cameroon. We have Mr. Henry Machemba from Malawi, our presenter from Rwanda, and Mr. Dieng from Senegal. Thank you so much for all your presentations, remarks today, and for all the efforts that you're undertaking to improve the budget process for your citizens. This, of course, would not have been possible without all of our other partners. And so thank you also to Dr. Patrick Olomo for the response from the African Union. And thank you for including this into the agenda for the continent. And I think all these different initiatives for oversight will continue to flourish with the participation of the African Union. Also, thank you to our UNICEF, our co-organizer today, and to Dr. Handa for your opening words. And also thank you to FCDO, the British Development Agency, and the European Union, which have been working with IBP in a number of initiatives for training civil society and for promoting dialogue, whether it's at the global level, but also at the sub-regional level, such as in Sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you very much for all this work. Ladies and gentlemen, the various efforts that we've seen here and we've looked at in Sub-Saharan Africa to improve budget transparency give us reason to hope for Sub-Saharan Africa. Despite the budget pressures that the zone is facing, and despite the different constraints in terms of diminishing aid, public aid, and more financial pressures, budget transparency is continuing to move in the right direction. I think that the pillar that is perhaps the weakest still at the world level is something where we are seeing some progress in the African region, especially when we look at the results of the 2025 OBS rather, where there have been improvements in many different areas, and I think this is a major accomplishment. And also this highlights a new trend. Governments are now trying to align government data and budget data with climate change, with gender, and with other sensitive issues, important issues. So I think that as we look at all this budget data and we can see the continued improvements in countries such as Cameroon and the other countries that have been providing institutional support and the other actions that we heard about to include more citizens in the consultation process, such as in Malawi, where they are focusing on improving youth participation and also illustrating how this participation can help reach people who are some of the most vulnerable groups and who are directly impacted by these budget discussions. Also in Rwanda, we saw how there was a very structured effort by the Rwandan government to reach out to civil society and to be able to provide this data and information to citizens. And finally, in Senegal, we talked about efforts made to increase access to information and the actions that are being undertaken to ensure that this work continues. Through all this, ladies and gentlemen, we have seen very clearly that the progress in Sub-Saharan Africa have been significant, and this is because people are refusing to have budgets that are opaque or exclusive. And this is something that is thanks to institutions that are more and more becoming open to this process and to working with civil society and the citizens. Of course, there are still challenges in terms of debt service and other areas, because this is perhaps the next wave where we will need to see more improvements. And if we look at these good practices of participation that are working well in DRC and Rwanda and Benin and elsewhere, we will continue to see progress. And audits, especially on the executive side, where the reports of actions that are being taken by the governments to be able to fill in these gaps show us that all the progress that we are looking for is starting to become real, and IBP is working very hard to work with our partners and civil society in all the region to strengthen our commitments with governments and parliaments and SAIs that are also working along the same lines. And we will need to continue to work on these efforts. This webinar is not the end, it's just the beginning, and we will continue working with all our partners to improve our progress. Thank you very much. And I would like to now conclude our webinar on accountability at Crossroads, the OBS 2025 findings for Sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you to everybody. And again, a reminder to look at the links that we put in the chat to look at the various reports. Thank you.